I'm Jessie.
And I'm Leah,
Welcome back to The Golden Thread.
the podcast where we share and discuss responsive relationships and connecting with children.
Today we're talking about observation and how to use it to help children have the experiences they need to do the learning they need. I love observation. And I also understand, I get a lot of feedback from anybody who has worked kind of around ECE or even with young toddlers and young babies about how it's a little bit daunting.
Yes, I would agree. I think when folks hear the word observation, they think that that means like a clipboard and a pen and check marks and 3 hours.
Spreadsheets.
Yes, spreadsheets. Yes, this huge, huge commitment. And when you're working with children and you just want to be with children, that feels overwhelming because that's not being with children.
Especially, I think a lot of times when you see parents, they're like, I am a parent constantly. I am constantly being a parent. And you want to add more onto that list of things I'm already doing constantly. That's not
Yeah,
what we need from observation, though.
it's not.
But before we jump into it, I would like to share what kind of our professional definition of responsive caregiving is.
I've got it right here. I
Okay,
just
great.
pulled it up. So, the definition that we are usually working from is when we think about responsive caregiving, we are talking about the process of watching and tuning in to an infant or toddler's cues and thinking about what they mean and responding in a sensitive way.
As part of that definition, watching them, noticing them, like being intentional about seeing the baby that's in the room with us, that's that observation part that we need so much of. And we are responsive with babies because the experiences that they have affect their learning. It affects, as we've discussed already, it affects the way their brains develop. It affects their view on the world and their view of themselves. So we want to be responsive, and part of responsive is that piece of taking them in, noticing them. Will you talk to me a little bit about some of your favorite ways to be responsive with babies?
I think for me, I'm at a place now where I really like to make eye contact with children. And so it's not necessarily that I'm in their space or that I'm picking them up or touching them, but it's like I'm in a room with them. Or, for example, yesterday, my son and I went for a walk, and there was a toddler across the street pushing their stroller, which was awesome. And they like stopped to look because my son was carrying all of the sticks. And and they looked over at us and I smiled and they stopped and they looked at me and I waved and then they waved back. And I think for me that's what it is just being there and being open to whatever it is that they feel comfortable sharing. And that looks, with children you don't know, it can be like that. With children you do know, sometimes it's being next to them and watching while they're doing something they enjoy and then sharing in that with them. I don't know. How about you? I want to hear
Mine
your ideas and jumpstart me.
mine is kind of adjacent to that in that one of my favorite ways of being responsive is to be present and supportive during risky play. I know that risky play is difficult for, I think, for professionals and parents alike, because we don't, especially as a professional, I don't want to send these babies home hurt, right? And I
Mhm.
know it's so important for babies for them to move their bodies the way their bodies want to move. So I really like to just be there and be supportive without preventing them or without giving them any anxiety over the things that they have to do. But we were also just talking earlier about how I fondly reminisce over having conversations.
Mhm.
Whether it's
Mhm.
uh like with a toddler or a baby that's got a lot of words that's talking back to me, or even someone who is just there hanging on to the way I'm interacting with them and clearly asking more, more, more. I really like that too. I love reminiscing on that feeling and that state that I'm in when I'm in space with those babies.
I think for me, like the being in a place where you can sit with children and be there with them in their world and just be fully present is just amazing, because then it gives us that opportunity to really find our curiosity about what's going on for them and then follow their lead. And wherever that might take us, even if it's just a few minutes at a time, I think it's so valuable.
So I think that like seeing these ways that we like to be responsive kind of opens a window into the topic of observation and observing babies. And if we were not like seeing the babies, seeing what they're doing, seeing their cues, if we were not doing that bit of observation and being intentional about it and asking ourselves a few key questions, I don't think we could enjoy those responsive interactions quite as much as we do now. And
Absolutely.
I say all the time, whether it's in professional settings of like facilitating the course or if it's even like with friends and family, and I'm talking about being an ECE teacher, I'm like, actually, 85% of my job is watching the babies, like literally observing them.
Yes. Yes, absolutely it is. Because it gives you so much insight and helps you to plan for the rest of the day and where you're going to go in the next 10 minutes. And I've found uh, that those observation skills have also transferred over to other parts of my life where I'm constantly kind of scanning and like, oh, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be addressed, which is what happens after you're in early childhood and you're the one who's observing and planning what needs to take place next for everybody to be happy and safe.
You talking about that and bringing that up reminds me of a couple of key things that have been impactful in my life, including kind of exploring the concept of emotional labor. I feel like being a very observant person and being the one can lead to us taking on a lot of that emotional labor, right? And
Yeah.
I feel like thinking of it through the lens of observation gives that an outlet instead of
Yeah.
it just piling up on us.
Hmm.
And then the
Hmm.
other thing is the being the one. I watched a really wonderful video, oh, years and years and years back, about somebody has to be the somebody. So, and this was specifically on actually a wildlife reserve sort of education farm sort of thing.
Hmm.
And the lady who runs it was talking about how you can kind of walk around all day and say, oh, somebody needs to do blah, somebody needs to do blah. And her example for the video was somebody needs to stir the poop because when you're composting poop, you have to stir poop, right?
Okay.
And so she talks about like, you can't get very far in life if you're not the somebody. You have to be the somebody sometimes.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, so I think that like understanding that sometimes, yes, it can pile up on us, but understanding that we have to sometimes be that somebody and having an outlet for those responsibilities and lists and tasks to go to, I think can be
Hmm.
very effective in our lives and in our responsive relationship. So speaking on like being the one and finding an outlet, can you talk a little bit to the fact that observations can be very like varied person to person and the way they look,
Yes.
right?
Absolutely. Yes. I think we recently discussed in the course about making learning visible. And I love how that ties in to observations and what we do, because there are so many ways that we can observe and document, and they don't have to be spreadsheets or checklists or anything like that. So, like, my favorite example is to just have the post it notes in the pocket, right? And And if you see something, you reach into your smock pocket and pull it out and write it down. And then you know, at the end of the day can put dates on it or whatever, or put it into your computer if you're having to track it for your employer or things like that. But I think observation can be videos, it can be pictures, it can be, you know, stories that we shared. When my son was in childcare with a wonderful family and childcare provider, she would do learning stories. And so that is, of course, a way that is a little bit more in depth and more work, but it was so powerful because it pulled in those pieces that are so important to you and I about wondering what's going on from the child's perspective and what learning is taking place. And I think there are as many ways as there are desires, as my grandma says, to do observations. And I think one of the things that I think we try to support our participants in our course is to just find what feels best for you and do that. And I think especially as a parent in this modern age, a lot of my observations of my child have been videos or snapshots on my phone. And then later I can go back and add language to that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, you tell me, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I was going to expand on because I know that we can kind of have the propensity to talk more toward the professional side of things. So I was going to expand on like the family and important adult side of things of like maybe an observation is a way for you to quickly note something down, whether it's a video, a picture, a quick note in your pocket, so that you can then come back to it maybe at the end of the day or at the end of the week as a way of being like, what have I seen this baby do while they're in space with me, and what can I do to take that further?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially as the important grown-ups in children's lives, we know that you have so much going on and so many things you're trying to do. And we also understand how beautiful it feels to have these moments. And so if we can help you integrate both in a small way in your life, and we think that can be pretty powerful.
So I do want to talk, like we gave kind of some examples earlier, a little bit nebulous about how we're observing in those times, but the examples of how we like to be responsive, and as part of those examples, observation comes. But some other ideas about how our families and important adults being observant with, like, in instances with babies. Because I think sometimes when we say observation, not only are people thinking, clipboards and checklists and spreadsheets, but
Hmm.
sometimes they also are thinking maybe more clinical of like, I'm watching baby do a specific experience that I've set up so that I can see these very specific skills. And but that's also
Hmm.
not what we're talking about when we're talking about observing and being in the moment either, right?
Right, right. Yeah, we're talking about considering what is going on for the child in that moment, but without any judgment of what's happening and just a sense of wonder about like I wonder what's going on for them and 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 just being in that moment. I think yes, there is that tendency we hear words and sometimes it makes us think we have to act or behave in a certain way. And for us, I guess when I'm thinking about as a parent and observing my child, like sometimes these things I'm observing because I want to share with a grandparent or I want to share with a family friend. Oh, look, your child's been doing this, and now I see my child doing this, and we want to talk about those things happening at the same time, and that's what we want you to do is think about like these small, easily digestible pieces.
Like we discussed when we were talking about how brains develop along the same continuum, even if not looking exactly the same. That's just
Mhm.
kind of development in general. And even if you're not a professional, you have access to lists of, ages and stages style development things for like your
Mhm.
baby has done these things, so these are the next steps. And so you can have those informations in your head, be thinking about what has my baby done and what's coming next, and be able to observe them throughout your day with them or throughout your time with them,
Mhm.
to see them doing things that signal, oh, that's what they're working on. That's the next step that they're working on. I want to know more about that step,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, are we going to provide? Do we want to provide some of the ones that we like the best of like developmental guidelines or?
Yeah, we sure can. I would say I things that I use, things that I share with professionals as resources. I use two all the time, and I hope I'm allowed to say them and it's not like, I don't know, copyrighted stuff. We'll find out. We'll do some research. I really love the Ages and Stages questionnaire. And what I love about those is that they're made to be completed by the family, which
Mm-hmm.
I think is really important for the family to be like, oh, is this what happening? Again, I think like Jesse and I say, we we view development as um, this progression of skills that happens. It's not necessarily at an age, it's not necessarily at a time. It is this, then this, then this is how we view things. And so the ages and stages aren't necessarily set up that way because it's like at this age is this happening. But I feel like it's kind of a good benchmark to start with. The other resource that I really like to use that's thinking about where are children developmentally is one that's here in Colorado, which is Colorado's Early Learning and Development Guidelines, which is free and accessible on the web. And um, I think it's broken down, not I think, I know. It's broken down by all of these different developmental domains and it's broken down by age. And what I really love is how empowering it is for families that if this is what my child is working on, this is something I can do to help support that happening. And I think there are so many times as parents where we're like, ah, what do I do? Do I do this? Do I do this? You know, what's going on with my child? And so I really love that it takes that family perspective of, oh, I'd like to help do this, and it gives the family some control to how they are going to interact with their child. But the key to that is you have to observe your child and see where your child is first, and then go from there. So observation really is the first step.
Yep. And I like that we're kind of talking about ages and stages and developmental domains and stuff because it kind of I had an experience the other day where I was sports casting, which again,
Mhm.
ECE term that maybe parents haven't heard or don't do, and a parent didn't understand what was going on. The parent was like, "Well, yeah, they did kick the ball." I was like, "Oh, I it's an ECE thing. I
Mhm.
talk about and I notice out loud what toddlers are doing as a developmental thing, and so speaking of, you know,
Yeah.
sportscasting or other terms that the vocabulary that is part of our world as professionals and parents may not have access to, and especially here in this resource about responsive care and responsiveness in relationships, I want to define something else. I want to define the respect, reflect, relate words that we will hear and use constantly.
Definitely.
Do
Yes.
do you want to give those definitions,
Oh,
or
yeah,
do you want me to give them
absolutely.
and we'll talk about it? What do you want to do?
Oh, I am good with either of those options. Yeah.
Um,
Uh, let's see. Oh, you know what? I've got the big definitions right here. So how about
okay.
I do that?
Okay.
Again, right? We're taking some of the things that we teach in our course and where we're facilitating these discussions with early childhood professionals. And that's our jumping off point for this. And so, more we're sharing these things, especially in this episode, so that we have a shared understanding of the language and the terms that we're using and that it's consistent. So, that's why we're sharing these definitions with you now, so that as we continue to use them throughout the course of this podcast, you can always come back to this episode and hear what we mean when we say those words. So, starting with respect, we view that as a way to observe the child over time and in different situations with openness and a high regard for the individuality of each child and family.
Talk about my
Let's
favorite
talk
part
about respect.
of respect is the high regard. every time I hear that definition, every time we read or talk about it in the course, absolutely. Every time I'm like, oh, high regard. Like that really sings to me.
Same, same. Because I think when we're working with young children, we're like, okay, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing that. And I so appreciate the intentionality with this language where we're singling out and we're saying, oh, no, we're not just seeing them, we're seeing them with high regard. This child is special. And I'm watching this child and wondering about this child, and this child is amazing. And we get to do that for every single child in our care. So same, high regards, always what I circle and underline. Yes.
And highlight an exclamation
And
mark.
highlight. Yes.
So
You knew
in
where
the
I was headed.
yeah, absolutely. So in the respect, we're talking about what is baby experiencing. Again, just a reminder,
Mhm.
we say babies, we've been saying babies, we mean anybody between just born and 3 years old. Is what
Yes.
we mean.
Yep.
So tell me about the definition for reflect, the definition we use for reflect.
So our definition for reflect is to wonder about the meaning and the intention of the child's behavior. And it's one of those yes ands. Consider your own internal reactions to what is happening.
And I think that every time we share that aspect of respect, reflect, relate, we're like, in the reflect step, think about how you're feeling. Everybody's surprised.
Yes, yes. They're always surprised. They're like, but no, this is about them. And we're like, actually, it's about us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think that that talks a lot like more for the important adults who are in relationship with these babies at home, like at that, again, you're the parent constantly, so you have that like long, expansive, infinite amount of time that you're in space with these babies, and so it's affecting you. And
Hmm.
if you just
Hmm.
ignore that and you don't ever think about it and you don't ever have that wonder, that's probably going to add up to something heavy for you, right?
Great. Yeah.
Do you, and don't answer this if you don't want to, have you
Okay.
ever thought about like the difference between baby one and baby two after having come into the
Yeah.
responsive world, and like
Yes.
how it affected you when you weren't wondering about what was going on inside?
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. I was actually talking about this the other night and just really, um, I have such a wonderful relationship with my daughter, but we do talk about this a lot because when she was growing up, I didn't have these skills and these tools, and I didn't think about the world and about interacting with babies in the same way that I do now. And so her experience was very, very different, and it was very adult directed, and this is how things would go and this is how it needed to be, and she just came along with the ride, and we did have moments of great joy and wonder together, but it is a very, very different experience after learning these skills and these strategies and then having my son and being able to practice them right from the very beginning.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I like to
Yeah.
hear that. So
Thanks.
when we're talking about reflect, we're talking about what
It's cool.
what might the baby be learning or trying to do, and again, what are your internal reactions to what you see?
And I know you just talked about this, but I really want to echo that it it might feel different or it might feel new to be like, it's why me? But really, this is such a pivotal part is to wonder about what's going on for the child and at the same time really be in tune with what's going on for us. Because as we continue these conversations, we will really start to lean into that and see how what we're bringing might be impacting what's going on for the baby in that moment. So, when we're talking about relating, we are talking about responding in ways that support children and their unique interests, their learning goals, and their strategies and interactions.
And I really like that in the relate, we are like we brushed up on it in respect and even a little bit in reflect. But in the relate, we are really being like, unique child, this child specifically. We're thinking about the baby that we are sharing space with, And so really like not just observing this baby, but being meeting them there, meeting them where they're at, and understanding that this is the baby I'm thinking.
Which is hard. And I think that's one of the discussions we frequently have is when you say this to an educator who's working with 8 or 10 infants in a classroom and they're like, "What? You want me to do this because I do all this for my babies and I do all this for my babies." And absolutely, we know they do. And we both have experienced that. And also, we know that when we can take even just 30 seconds and focus on this child and their interest and their learning goals, that opens up a window of connection that allows us to really provide and relate back to them in a way that can be so powerful for both of us.
Yeah. I think, again, like echoing, we're working with professionals and we're talking in conversation with them. Um, I often talk about when I want to incorporate more observation in the space because I feel like I'm not connecting with these babies. I don't make it feel like a huge toll on my day. I just want to get one observation from one of these babies a day. That means I'm going to
Mhm.
have 5 observations in the week, and that's just where I'm starting. And that makes it manageable. That makes it like real and tangible. And then once I can see the effect of, I get to know these babies a little better. I get to know what I want to bring in the experiences in the classroom and stuff a little better. Then I can start adding on. Then I can
Yeah.
start being really intentional about, oh, this is making my day run a little better because I know at such and such time this one is going to get a little hangry and start throwing things, so I want
Yes.
to bring out some goldfish or something.
Right.
Right?
Right. Exactly. Or somebody's going to get a little bit tired this time. So we just need to maybe do some book reading and let them sit a little bit over here and have some protected space so that they can regroup before we make it through lunch and then head to nap. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's little windows of insight into who they are and how they work. And it just makes our time together so much better. It's amazing.
And
Yeah.
as we keep continuing through, like talking through our list of ideas and topics and domains and everything, like we will have more tools that we can bring in, more ideas about, like, well, I shared this once with some participants and they really latched on. And um, I know, like, right now we're just introducing these things, and as we bring those tools, like, it'll become more concrete and more usable in your space at home or wherever you're interacting with these babies that you care about.
When we think about that relate step, it really is what are you going to try next? You see this child, you've wondered about what's going on for them and thought about, what's going on for you. And then what is your next step based on what you've seen? And we all do this in and I can't even think of the right word. We do this all day, every day, right? You feed your child a snack and then you stop to see, am I going to give them more or am I going to give them something to drink or is it time to wash hands and get down? That's exactly what we're talking about. And one of the beautiful things about this is we are bringing forward things that you already do, but we're telling you why they're so important and giving you some language to use around them so that you might think of them through a slightly different lens.
Yeah, earlier when you shared kind of the difference between baby one and baby two, you said that these were skills you didn't have. And I think they were skills you did have. You just didn't
Good
hone them
point.
and use them intentionally, right?
Yes, so true. So true. Yes.
Yeah. So I think
Thank you
that,
for reframing that.
yeah, of
Yeah.
course. And so I think that that's why we wanted to bring, because again, we're talking to professionals every semester about this, but that's one of the big reasons why we wanted to bring it into this space where families and friends and neighbors, to
Hmm.
steal from Colorado's FFN network,
Yes, yes,
we want to bring it to
absolutely.
them too, who aren't getting paid. There are no stay-at-home moms getting paid to have their babies with them all day, turns out. So,
Dang it. Not
right,
yet.
not yet.
Not yet. There are so many things we are going to manifest.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yes, I love it. But yeah, so that's why we wanted to bring this to everybody. Let's make the whole world baby people,
Hmm.
and get to know these skills that you have, and you can hone and make stronger, and meet yourself where you're at too, and go to
Yes.
the next steps intentionally and with purpose.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, what are
Yes.
some of your key takeaways about observation and how we do that in care with babies?
Well, I think it looks like I probably just jumped ahead and did that, but just to reiterate that these are things, and just like you reframed it for me, these are things we are probably already intuitively doing. We just might not be intentionally thinking about it. And so we're hoping that listening to this has given you a few things to think about where you can identify the ways that you've been observing your child or the children in your life, where you understand one cry means I'm tired and another cry means I'm scared and I need some help right now, and other things that you've already started to differentiate on your own. Again, we're giving you that language and that way to think about it. That's a little bit more in depth.
I like one of the examples we have in the notes about like noticing personality changes when a baby is getting sick or teething maybe.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
think that that is important and powerful for me to point out, because I know that I've heard sometimes from parents who say, I've noticed these things, but I feel like, am I being too helicoptery, or, whatever. And I
Hmm.
think that by bringing it to this space and talking about how you can use it as a way of being responsive in your relationship with the baby, it gives a place for that to go, so that you're not just like, okay, I noticed this, I know this, I want this thing. It's not just you being particular or helicoptery. It's giving you a way to navigate that toward, and this is what I'm doing with it for next steps.
Yes, I think when we become intentional with our observation, we are more prepared. And so that's a difference with being helicoptery, right? It's a, oh, I see this, I know what to expect, and I can help smooth this transition so it's less of a transition for both of us. And that in itself is incredibly valuable.
So I'm curious. Here's our question that we ask you to prompt you to send us stuff into the email. Have you tried to observe an experience of a child and reflect on that observation? And if you have, what ways might you be able to record and reflect on observations that like works out for you? And if you guys send those things in, we're going to circle back to it once we get feedback, so that we can send it out into the world. Let everybody
That's right.
kind of sort of facilitate a conversation through this podcast medium.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So you can send those things to the golden threadcast at gmail.com, where we would love to hear what ways you've tried to observe and how have you been recording and reflecting on those observations.
Or any other feedback or
Or
questions.
any other feedback. That's true. That's true. We will take that. Yes.
All right. Well, I really appreciate our time together.
Yes, me too. Thank you all for joining us.
Um, what are we going to be discussing next time?
So, next time, we will be talking about how we are choosing to be intentional in our relationships with young children.
I don't know if anybody's noticed, but intentional is a big word for me.
It is a really big word. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.